The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dry goods store, and Natalie Harper clutched her carpetbag tighter, watching the dust settle around the wheels as her heart hammered against her ribs. She had never been this far from Philadelphia in her 22 years, and the vastness of Wyoming territory in the spring of 1878 made her feel impossibly small and vulnerable. The telegram she had received 3 weeks ago sat folded in her reticule. The words burned into her memory. Your aunt has passed, you are sole heir, come immediately to settle estate in Cheyenne. The problem was that Medicine Bow, where the stagecoach had deposited her, was only halfway to her destination, and the driver had just announced that the stage would not continue for another 4 days due to a broken axle. Miss, you cannot stay here at the station, the weathered station manager told her, tobacco juice staining the corner of his mouth. We do not have accommodations for ladies. The boarding house down the street might take you, but 4 days is a long time to wait, and it will cost you dear. Natalie calculated rapidly in her head. She had limited funds, and every dollar spent on lodging was a dollar she might need for her return journey or to settle her aunt's affairs. The inheritance was supposed to be modest, a small house and some savings, nothing extravagant. She could not afford to squander her resources. Is there another way to Cheyenne? She asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. The station manager shrugged. Hire a horse, I suppose, if you know how to ride, or find someone headed that direction willing to take you. But a lady traveling alone. He shook his head, the implication clear. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had heard the stories, of course. Women who traveled unescorted in the territories faced dangers from wild animals, hostile encounters, and men whose moral compasses had been lost somewhere in the vast wilderness. Her mother had warned her before she left, begging her not to make the journey. But Natalie had no siblings, no husband, no one else who could handle her aunt's estate. She had to do this alone, even though the prospect terrified her. She stepped out into the afternoon sun, squinting against the brightness. Medicine Bow was hardly a town at all, just a collection of rough-hewn buildings clustered along the railroad tracks and a dusty main street. Cowboys and railroad workers moved about their business, none paying her much attention. She walked toward the boarding house, her city boots pinching her feet, her traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust. The boarding house was run by a stern-faced woman who quoted her a price that made Natalie wince. She took the room anyway, knowing she had little choice, and spent a restless first night listening to unfamiliar sounds. The lowing of cattle in distant pens, the occasional shout or burst of laughter from the saloon down the street, the whistle of wind across the open prairie. The next morning, she made inquiries at the general store about hiring a horse. The proprietor, a balding man with shrewd eyes, looked her up and down and shook his head. Do you even know how to ride, miss? I have ridden in Central Park, Natalie said, lifting her chin. He laughed outright. This is not a park pony, and the trail to Cheyenne is 60 miles of rough country. You would not make it 10 miles before you fell off or got lost. I cannot in good conscience rent you a horse. Frustrated and fighting tears, Natalie walked back outside. She stood on the wooden sidewalk, watching a freight wagon roll past, feeling the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She was stuck in this isolated place, running through her limited funds, and no closer to reaching Cheyenne. Excuse me, miss. She turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and brown eyes that held a cautious kindness. He wore the typical garb of a cowboy, worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, a bandana around his neck, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and he looked to be in his mid-20s. I do not mean to intrude, he said, his voice quiet and measured. But I overheard you asking about passage to Cheyenne. I happened to be in the store just now. Natalie felt a flash of wariness. This was exactly what her mother had warned her about. Strange men approaching her with offers that seemed too convenient. "I appreciate your concern, but I will manage," she said stiffly. He nodded, not seeming offended. "I am sure you will. I just thought you should know that I am heading to Cheyenne myself, leaving tomorrow morning at first light. I have business there with a cattle buyer. If you were inclined, you could ride with me. It would be safer than going alone, and you would not have to wait for the stage." "I do not know you, sir," Natalie said, her voice sharper than she intended. "No, you do not." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "My name is Harrison Nash. I work for the Double Bar Ranch, about 15 miles north of here. This is a letter from my employer, Samuel Wright, regarding the cattle sale. You can verify it with anyone in town. Sam Wright is well known in these parts, and I have worked for him for 4 years. I am not in the habit of making off with young ladies, if that is your concern." Natalie took the letter with trembling fingers and scanned it. The handwriting was bold and clear, detailing terms of sale for a herd of cattle to be delivered to Cheyenne. Harrison Nash's name appeared several times as the ranch foreman in charge of the transaction. "I would not ask for money," Harrison continued. "I am going that direction anyway. You could keep your own company, and I would simply ensure you arrived safely. We would camp one night on the trail, but I give you my word as a gentleman that you would not be bothered." Natalie looked at him, trying to read his intentions. His face was honest, with none of the leering quality she had seen in some of the men around town. His eyes met hers directly but respectfully. Still, the idea of riding off into the wilderness with a complete stranger made her stomach clench with anxiety. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course." He put his hat back on, tipping it slightly. "I will be at the livery stable at dawn if you decide to come. No obligation either way." He walked off down the street, his gait easy and unhurried. Natalie clutched the letter and hurried back to the boarding house, her mind spinning. She spent the afternoon making inquiries. The general store proprietor confirmed that Samuel Wright was indeed a prominent rancher and that Harrison Nash was his foreman, a man with a solid reputation. The boarding house proprietor, when pressed, admitted that she knew of the Nash family and that Harrison was considered reliable and honest. "He is a good man, from what I hear," the woman said. "Keeps to himself mostly. His parents died when he was young, and Sam Wright took him in. He has worked his way up fair and square. If he says he will see you safely to Cheyenne, I believe he would." That night, Natalie lay awake again, weighing her options. She could wait 4 more days for the stage, spending money she could barely afford, or she could take a chance on a stranger's kindness. Every instinct told her to be cautious, but she also sensed that Harrison Nash's offer was genuine. There had been something in his manner, a quiet decency that she wanted to trust. By the time the sky began to lighten, she had made her decision. She dressed in her most practical traveling outfit, a split riding skirt she had purchased in anticipation of Western travel, and a simple cotton blouse. She packed her few belongings, settled her account with the boarding house, and walked through the still dark streets to the livery stable. Harrison was already there, checking the saddle on a sturdy bay horse. A second horse, a gentle-looking mare, stood saddled beside it. He looked up as she approached, and something like relief crossed his face. "You came," he said simply. "I am still afraid," Natalie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have never done anything like this." "That is sensible," Harrison said. "Being afraid means you are paying attention. But I promise you I am going the same direction, and we might as well ride together. You will be safe with me." He helped her secure her carpet bag to the saddle, then showed her how to mount properly. The mare shifted beneath her, and Natalie gripped the saddle horn tightly. "Her name is Daisy," Harrison said. She is as calm as they come. Just sit easy and let her follow my horse. She knows the way. They rode out of Medicine Bow as the sun crested the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink. The vastness of the landscape was both terrifying and breathtaking. Natalie had never seen so much open space, so much sky. In Philadelphia, buildings hemmed in the world, making it manageable and comprehensible. Here, there were no boundaries, just rolling grasslands stretching to the distant mountains. For the first hour, they rode in silence. Natalie focused on staying in the saddle, on the rhythm of the horse beneath her. Harrison kept a steady pace, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was managing. The morning air was cool and fresh, scented with sage and grass. Eventually, Harrison slowed his horse so they rode side by side. "You are doing well," he said. "Most city folks are sore and complaining by now." "I am definitely sore," Natalie said with a wry smile. "But I am trying not to complain." "Where are you from originally?" "Philadelphia. My father was a clerk, and we lived in a small house near the shipyards. He passed 2 years ago, and my mother died last winter of pneumonia. I am alone now except for my aunt. Or I was. She died a few weeks ago, which is why I am making this journey." "I am sorry for your losses," Harrison said, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "That is a heavy burden of grief to carry." "And you?" Natalie asked, wanting to shift the focus. "The boarding house proprietor said your parents died young. When I was 14, cholera took them both within a week of each other. Sam Wright was my father's friend, and he took me in, gave me work. I owe him everything." "You have no other family?" "No siblings, no aunts or uncles that I know of. It has just been me and Sam and the other ranch hands. They are as close to family as I have now." They fell silent again, but it was a companionable silence now. Natalie found herself relaxing slightly, trusting the horse to carry her, trusting Harrison to know the way. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat. Harrison had packed food, dried beef, hard biscuits, and canteens of water. They sat in the shade of a lone cottonwood tree, and Natalie removed her bonnet to fan herself. "How much farther today?" she asked. "We will cover about 30 miles before we need to make camp. There is a good spot near a creek where we can stop for the night. Tomorrow we should reach Cheyenne by late afternoon." "You make this journey often?" "A few times a year. Sam sends me to negotiate sales and check on the market prices. It is not glamorous work, but it is important." "Do you like it, being a foreman?" Harrison considered the question, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of dried beef. "I do. I like working with the cattle, being outdoors. I like the responsibility Sam has given me. It is honest work, and I am good at it." "What will you do after you complete this business in Cheyenne?" "Head back to the ranch. We have a busy summer ahead, moving the herd to better grazing, preparing for the fall roundup. It is a cycle that repeats every year, but it never gets boring. Every season brings different challenges." Natalie found herself fascinated by his descriptions of ranch life, so utterly foreign to her own experience. She told him about Philadelphia, about the noise and crowds and the way the city smelled of coal smoke and river water. She told him about her father's patient instruction in reading and mathematics, how he had encouraged her education even though many believed it was wasted on a girl. She told him about her mother's careful budgeting, how they had managed on limited means with dignity and grace. Harrison listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. As the afternoon wore on and they continued their journey, Natalie realized she was no longer quite so afraid. There was something steady and reassuring about Harrison's presence, the way he navigated the trail with quiet confidence. The landscape changed subtly as they rode, the flat prairie giving way to gentle hills. They passed a small herd of pronghorn antelope, which Harrison pointed out with quiet excitement. Natalie watched the graceful animals bound away, their white rumps flashing in the sunlight. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Harrison led them to a creek lined with willows and cottonwoods. The water sparkled over smooth stones, and the sound of it was soothing after the vastness of the prairie silence. "We will camp here," Harrison said, dismounting. He came to help Natalie down, and she was grateful for the assistance. Her legs trembled when she tried to stand, stiff from hours in the saddle. "I feel like I will never walk normally again," she said with a shaky laugh. "The soreness will ease," Harrison assured her. "Walk around a bit, keep the blood moving." While Natalie paced along the creek bank, working the stiffness from her muscles, Harrison unsaddled the horses and hobbled them so they could graze. He moved with practiced efficiency, gathering firewood and building a small fire as the light faded. From his saddlebags, he produced a small pot and makings for coffee as well as more food. "I should help," Natalie said, feeling guilty for standing idle. "You are a guest," Harrison said. "Besides, I have been doing this since I was a boy. It is easier if I just do it." He was not dismissive, just matter-of-fact. Natalie settled on a flat rock near the fire and watched him work. The domesticity of the scene struck her as oddly intimate. A man and a woman alone under the vast sky, sharing a fire and a meal. Yet Harrison maintained a respectful distance, never encroaching on her space. They ate beans and salt pork heated over the fire, and drank strong black coffee that made Natalie's eyes water. The stars began to emerge, more stars than she had ever imagined existed. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It never gets old," Harrison agreed. He had moved to sit across the fire from her, keeping that careful space between them. "On clear nights when I am out with the herd, I sometimes just lie on my back and stare up at it all. Makes you feel small, but in a good way. Like your problems are not as big as they seem. I wish I could feel that way. My problems feel enormous right now." "Tell me," Harrison said gently. So Natalie found herself pouring out her worries. The uncertainty of her aunt's estate, her fears about having enough money to live on, her lack of prospects in Philadelphia without family connections. She told him how lonely she had been since her mother died, how frightening it was to navigate the world as a woman alone. "I do not know what I will do after I settle the estate," she admitted. "I have no trade, no husband, no one to rely on. I thought perhaps I could find work as a governess or a seamstress, but those positions are scarce and pay poorly." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "The West is different from the East. There are more opportunities here for people willing to work hard, regardless of their circumstances. It is not easy, but it is possible to build a life. Women run boarding houses, work as cooks, even stake homestead claims. It is not as rigid as the cities." "Are you suggesting I stay in Wyoming?" "I am suggesting that you have options. You do not have to go back to Philadelphia if there is nothing there for you." The idea had not occurred to Natalie, but once Harrison said it, something stirred in her chest. What did Philadelphia hold for her now? Memories and grief, a city that had never quite felt like home without her parents. Could she make a fresh start here, in this wild and open place? "I would not even know where to begin," she said. "You begin by settling your aunt's affairs. Then you take stock and make decisions from there. You do not have to figure it all out tonight." His practicality was comforting. Natalie smiled at him across the fire, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. Harrison set up her bedroll at a discreet distance from his own, near a cluster of bushes that provided some privacy. He gave her a blanket and showed her how to check for snakes or scorpions before lying down. "I will keep the fire going," he said. If you need anything, just call out. Natalie lay beneath the stars, wrapped in the blanket, listening to the creak and the occasional sounds Harrison made tending the fire. She should have been terrified, sleeping in the open wilderness with a man she barely knew. Instead, she felt safer than she had in weeks. Harrison had been nothing but kind and respectful, treating her with a gentle courtesy that never felt condescending. She drifted off thinking about his suggestion that she might stay in Wyoming, and her dreams were full of open spaces and endless sky. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon frying. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern horizon, and Harrison was already up, cooking breakfast over the revived fire. Natalie sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. "Good morning," Harrison called softly. "Hope I did not wake you too early, but we should get moving soon if we want to reach Cheyenne by afternoon." Natalie used the privacy of the bushes to freshen up as best she could with water from the creek, then joined Harrison for breakfast. Her muscles protested every movement, but the stiffness was slightly less than the night before. They rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, following the trail toward Cheyenne. The landscape grew more populated as they traveled, with occasional ranches visible in the distance and more frequent travelers on the road. Harrison relaxed his vigilance somewhat, though Natalie noticed he still kept alert, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "Were you worried about something specific?" she asked. "Just being cautious. There are bandits sometimes, and you never know when you might encounter trouble. But we are close to Cheyenne now, and the route is well traveled. We should be fine." They talked more easily now, the conversations flowing naturally. Harrison told her about working cattle, about the different personalities of horses, about the harsh winters and beautiful springs in Wyoming. Natalie told him about books she had read, plays she had seen in Philadelphia, the small joys of city life. "You must think I am terribly naive," she said at one point, "going on about theater performances when you are dealing with real survival out here." "I do not think that at all," Harrison said firmly. "Culture and beauty matter just as much as practical skills. Maybe more. What is the point of surviving if there is nothing to enrich your soul?" His words surprised her. She had not expected such philosophical depth from a cowboy, and she realized she had been guilty of making assumptions based on his occupation. "I apologize," she said. "I have been condescending without meaning to be." "You have not," Harrison assured her. "You have been honest about your experience, which is all anyone can do. We all have different kinds of knowledge. Mine comes from the land and animals. Yours comes from books and society. Neither is better or worse." As Cheyenne came into view in the early afternoon, Natalie felt an unexpected pang of sadness. The journey was ending, and with it, her time with Harrison. She had grown accustomed to his steady presence, his quiet humor, the way he made her feel heard and valued. Cheyenne was a real city, bustling with activity. Buildings lined wide streets, and people moved purposefully about their business. Harrison guided them to a respectable hotel near the center of town. "You should stay here," he said. "It is safe and clean. I will be at the stockyards for the next few days, completing my business." He helped her down from the horse and retrieved her carpetbag. They stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. "Thank you," Natalie said, her voice thick with emotion. "You kept your word. I arrived safely." "It was my pleasure," Harrison said. He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything while you are settling your aunt's affairs, I will be in town. You can leave a message for me at the stockyards." "I will remember that." She watched him ride away, leading the gentle mare Daisy, and felt unexpectedly bereft. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of legal matters. Natalie met with her aunt's lawyer, a dour man named Pemberton who handed her keys and documents with businesslike efficiency. Her aunt's house was small but well-maintained, in a quiet neighborhood. The estate included the house, some modest savings, and a few pieces of jewelry. It was more than Natalie had hoped for, but not enough to live on indefinitely without some source of income. She spent the evenings in the house, sorting through her aunt's possessions, reading old letters that painted a picture of a solitary but contented life. Her aunt had been a widow for many years, supporting herself with sewing and careful management of her resources. She had been self-reliant and independent, qualities Natalie admired. On the fourth day, Natalie made a decision. She would sell the house and use the proceeds to establish herself in Cheyenne. She would find work, perhaps open a small shop or take in sewing as her aunt had done. She would build a life here, in this place that felt like possibility instead of limitation. Having made the decision, she felt lighter. She instructed Mr. Pemberton to begin the process of selling the house and walked out into the afternoon sunshine with a sense of purpose. She found herself walking toward the stockyards, telling herself she was just exploring the city. But when she asked a worker if Harrison Nash was around, she knew she had been fooling herself. "He is in the back pens inspecting cattle," the man said, pointing. Natalie picked her way carefully around mud puddles and piles of manure, feeling very out of place in her city dress. She found Harrison leaning on a fence rail, watching a group of men separate cattle into different pens. His shirt was dusty, and he had pushed his hat back, revealing the line of pale skin at his forehead. He turned and saw her, surprise and pleasure lighting his face. "Miss Harper," he said, coming to meet her. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," she said quickly. "I just wanted to thank you again, and to tell you that I have decided to stay in Wyoming." "You have?" His smile widened. "That is wonderful news. What will you do?" "I am going to sell my aunt's house and use the money to establish myself here in Cheyenne. I am not sure exactly what yet, but I will figure it out." "You will," Harrison said with confidence. "You are resourceful and smart. You will make a success of it." They stood smiling at each other, and Natalie felt her heart beating faster. This man, who had been a stranger just days ago, had shown her kindness and respect. He had listened to her fears and dreams without judgment. He had made her feel capable and valued. "When do you return to the ranch?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning. My business here is concluded." "Oh." The disappointment was sharp. Harrison seemed to struggle with something, then said in a rush, "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? There is a decent restaurant near your hotel. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." "I would like that very much," Natalie said. They met at sunset. Harrison had cleaned up, changing into a pressed shirt and a vest, his hair still damp from washing. He looked handsome and slightly nervous, which Natalie found endearing. Over plates of beef and potatoes, they talked about everything and nothing. Harrison told her more about the ranch, about Sam Wright and the other hands. Natalie told him about her plans, admitting they were still vague and uncertain. "I wish I did not have to leave tomorrow," Harrison said quietly. "I would like to help you get settled." "You have done more than enough already," Natalie said. "Besides, you have responsibilities at the ranch." "I know, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I have enjoyed your company, Miss Harper, more than I have enjoyed anyone's in a long time. I find myself hoping this is not the last time I see you." Natalie felt her cheeks flush with pleasure. "I have enjoyed your company as well, Mr. Nash. Very much." "Harrison," he corrected gently. "Please, just Harrison. Then you must call me Natalie." They lingered over coffee, neither wanting the evening to end. Finally, Harrison walked her back to the hotel. They stood in the lobby, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. "I will write to you," Harrison said, "if you would like that." "I would like that more than anything," Natalie said. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture both courtly and tender. Then he was gone, and Natalie climbed the stairs to her room feeling as though she were floating. Over the next 6 weeks, letters arrived with faithful regularity. Harrison's handwriting was surprisingly elegant, and his letters were full of details about ranch life, observations about the changing season, and carefully worded expressions of his growing feelings. Natalie responded with equal eagerness, telling him about her progress in Cheyenne. She had found work as a seamstress with an established dressmaker, a formidable woman named Mrs. Cartwright, who appreciated Natalie's skill with fine stitching. The work was steady and paid reasonably well. She had also begun taking in mending on her own, building a small clientele. The house had sold for a fair price, giving her a financial cushion. But more than any practical success, Natalie wrote to Harrison about how she felt. The growing confidence, the sense of belonging, the way Cheyenne was becoming home. And woven through every letter was her anticipation of his next message, her constant thoughts of him. In early July, Harrison's letter contained an invitation. The ranch was hosting a dance to celebrate the summer, and he hoped Natalie would come. He would send a wagon to collect her, and she could stay with Sam Wright's sister, who lived on the ranch and served as a chaperone for such occasions. Natalie accepted immediately. The ranch was even more impressive than Harrison's descriptions. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow. The land seemed to stretch forever in every direction. Harrison met the wagon, and Natalie's breath caught at the sight of him. He seemed to belong here in a way that made perfect sense, part of the landscape itself. His smile when he saw her was brilliant and unguarded. "You came," he said, helping her down. "Did you think I would not? I hoped, but I worried. It is a long journey just for a dance." "It is not just for a dance," Natalie said softly. They stared at each other, and the months of separation fell away. All the feelings cultivated through letters blazed into vivid immediacy. Sam Wright's sister, a kindly widow named Eleanor, took charge of Natalie, showing her to a comfortable room and helping her prepare for the dance. The event was held in the large barn, which had been cleaned and decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. A small group of musicians played fiddles and guitars, and the ranch hands mixed with neighbors from surrounding ranches. Harrison claimed Natalie for the first dance and hardly left her side all evening. They whirled across the floor, laughing and breathless. When the music slowed, Harrison held her close, and Natalie felt the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I have thought about you every day," he murmured near her ear. "Your letters have been the bright spot in every week." "I have thought of you constantly," Natalie admitted. "You have become essential to my happiness." They stole away from the dance, walking out into the cool night air. The stars were as brilliant as that first night on the trail, and Harrison took Natalie's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know it has only been a short time," he said, "but I am certain of my feelings. I have fallen in love with you, Natalie Harper. You are brave and smart and beautiful, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Natalie felt tears spring to her eyes, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. "I love you too, Harrison Nash. I think I began falling in love with you that first morning in Medicine Bow, when you offered to ride with me. You made me feel safe when I was terrified, and you have made me feel cherished ever since." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a kiss both tender and passionate. Natalie wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all her love and longing into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "Marry me," Harrison said. "I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a ranch foreman, and the life is hard sometimes. But I will love you with everything I have. and I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "Yes," Natalie said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They told Eleanor and Sam right that night, and both were delighted. Sam clapped Harrison on the back and told Natalie she was getting a good man. Eleanor embraced her and immediately began planning the wedding. "We can hold it here at the ranch," she said. "In September when the weather is lovely." "Oh, this is wonderful news." Natalie stayed at the ranch for a week, getting to know the place that would be her home. Harrison showed her everything. The cattle grazing in distant pastures, the horses in the corrals, the bunkhouse where the hands lived, the small foreman's house that would be theirs after the wedding. It was modest but well built, with 2 rooms and a porch that looked out over the mountains. "We can add on as we need to," Harrison said. "Sam has already said he will help with materials. We can make it into a real home." Natalie could see it. Curtains at the windows, a garden plot for vegetables, maybe chickens in a coop. She could see the life they would build together, rooted in this place. Before she returned to Cheyenne, Harrison took her riding up into the foothills. They stopped at a spot overlooking the ranch. The valley spread out below them like a patchwork quilt. "I want you to know what you are agreeing to," Harrison said seriously. "The winters are hard here. We get snowed in sometimes for days. The work is never done, and there is always something that needs fixing or tending. It is not an easy life." "I am not afraid of hard work," Natalie said. "And I am not afraid of winters, not if I am with you. You have shown me that I am stronger than I thought. I can handle whatever comes, as long as we face it together." Harrison pulled her close, and they sat watching the sun sink toward the mountains, wrapped in each other's arms. Back in Cheyenne, Natalie gave notice to Mrs. Cartwright, who was sorry to lose her but understood. She began preparing for the wedding, sewing her own dress with careful attention to every detail. She chose a simple design in ivory silk, elegant and practical. The weeks leading up to September seemed to drag by, each day an eternity. But finally the morning arrived. Eleanor had sent a wagon to collect Natalie and her few possessions, and she made the journey to the ranch with her heart singing. The ceremony was held outdoors, with the mountains as a backdrop. The ranch hands had built an arbor and decorated it with late summer flowers. A minister from the nearest town officiated. Sam Wright gave Natalie away, and Eleanor stood as her witness. Harrison waited at the arbor in a new suit, his face alight with love and joy. As Natalie walked toward him, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This man, this place, this life. It was everything she had never known she wanted. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with such tenderness that Natalie felt her heart might burst. The celebration afterward was joyful and raucous. The ranch hands brought out their instruments, and there was dancing and feasting late into the night. Natalie was passed from partner to partner for dances, everyone wanting to congratulate the new bride. But her eyes kept seeking Harrison, and every time their gazes met, the love between them was palpable. Finally, as the stars emerged and the party began to wind down, Harrison swept Natalie into his arms and carried her across the yard to the foreman's house. Someone had lit lamps inside and left flowers on the table. It was cozy and welcoming, a home. Harrison set Natalie on her feet and closed the door, shutting out the rest of the world. They stood facing each other, suddenly shy despite the months of longing. "Hello, wife," Harrison said softly. "Hello, husband," Natalie replied. He reached for her, and she came into his arms willingly. They spent their wedding night discovering each other, learning the language of touch and whispered endearments, cementing their bond in the most intimate way. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Natalie had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and physical labor. Harrison taught her to ride properly, to help with basic ranch tasks, to read the weather and the land. She taught him to appreciate small domestic comforts, the pleasure of a well-cooked meal, the joy of reading aloud in the evenings by lamplight. They quarreled occasionally, as all couples do, usually over minor things. But they learned to talk through their differences, to compromise, to choose their battles. The love between them deepened and matured, becoming something solid and enduring. The first winter was indeed hard. Snow fell for days, drifting high against the house. Harrison had to tunnel paths to the barn to tend the animals. Natalie kept the fire going and made hearty meals to warm them. In the long evenings, they talked and played cards and made love, the intimacy intensified by their isolation. When spring came, it felt like a resurrection. The snow melted, revealing the greening prairie. Natalie planted her garden, coaxing vegetables from the soil. Harrison worked from dawn to dusk with the cattle, preparing for the summer drive. In late May, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his face transformed with wonder and joy. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Natalie asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "I am happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me everything, Natalie. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with gratitude." "You have given me the same," she said, covering his hand with hers. "Before I met you, I felt lost and alone. You gave me a place to belong." Their son was born in January of 1880, during a howling snowstorm. Eleanor came to help with the birth, and Harrison paced the floor of the main house, driven half-mad with worry. But Natalie was strong, and the baby arrived healthy and squalling. They named him Henry Wright Nash, honoring both Harrison's given name initial and Sam Wright's role in their lives. Henry had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the moment Harrison held him, he was utterly besotted. Watching Harrison with their son, seeing the gentle care he took with the tiny baby, Natalie fell in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, changing nappies without complaint, walking the floor with Henry when he was fussy, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice. The foreman's house suddenly felt too small with a baby, and Harrison began the promised expansion, adding 2 more rooms with Sam's help. Natalie sewed curtains and painted furniture, making it bright and cheerful. Life settled into a new rhythm. Natalie balanced motherhood with her work, helping around the ranch and occasionally taking in sewing to earn extra money. Harrison continued his duties as foreman but made sure to spend time with his family every evening, no matter how tired he was. When Henry was 2, Natalie became pregnant again. This time she felt more confident, less anxious. Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring morning, arriving so quickly that Harrison barely had time to fetch Eleanor. They named her Rose Ellen Nash, after the wild roses that bloomed on the prairie and Eleanor's kindness to them. Rose had Natalie's auburn hair and Harrison's brown eyes, and she was a sunny, easy baby. Henry was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. The house rang with laughter and occasional tears, the beautiful chaos of family life. In the summer of 1883, Sam Wright announced his intention to retire. He was in his late 60s and feeling the weight of his years. He called Harrison and Natalie to the main house for a conversation. "I am getting too old for this," Sam said bluntly. "My bones ache, and I am tired. I want to move to town, live out my remaining years in comfort. I am offering to sell you the ranch, Harrison. You have been like a son to me, and you know this place as well as I do. You can pay me over time, work out the details with a lawyer. What do you say?" Harrison looked stunned. "Sam, I do not know what to say. This is more than generous." "It is good business sense," Sam said gruffly. You will keep this place running successfully. I trust you. So do we have a deal? Harrison looked at Natalie, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, he said. Yes, we have a deal. The transition took several months, but by the end of the year, Harrison and Natalie officially owned the Double Bar Ranch. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. They were no longer employees but owners, responsible for everything. They rose to the challenge. Harrison proved to be an excellent manager, fair with the hands and shrewd in his business dealings. Natalie handled the household accounts and helped with strategic decisions. Together, they made the ranch prosper. Their third child, a son they named James Samuel Nash, was born in the spring of 1885. He was a robust baby who rarely cried, content to observe the world with solemn eyes. With 3 children, life was hectic and exhausting and profoundly fulfilling. On their 7th wedding anniversary, Harrison and Natalie stole away for a rare moment alone. They rode up to the overlook where Harrison had once told Natalie what ranch life would be like. They sat in the same spot, watching the sun set over their land. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked. "Giving up city life, marrying a cowboy?" "Not for a single moment," Natalie said firmly. "That day in Medicine Bow when I was so afraid, you gave me more than safe passage to Cheyenne. You gave me a chance at a real life, at love and belonging. You gave me everything that matters." "I fell in love with you on that trail ride," Harrison admitted. "By the time we reached Cheyenne, I was already thinking about how I could convince you to stay in Wyoming, how I could see you again. I have thanked God every day since that you agreed to marry me." "I was afraid of traveling alone," Natalie said, echoing those early days. "But you said you were going the same direction, and that we should ride together. It was the best decision I ever made, trusting you." They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, their children safe with Eleanor back at the house, their ranch thriving around them. The years continued to unfold. Henry grew into a tall, capable boy who loved working with his father. Rose was spirited and clever, learning to ride almost before she could walk properly. James was gentle and thoughtful, preferring books to ranch work but finding his place nonetheless. In 1889, Natalie gave birth to twin daughters, Alice Marie and Lucy Claire Nash. The house was pandemonium with 5 children, but it was joyful pandemonium. Harrison expanded the house again, adding a 2nd floor with more bedrooms. It was no longer a modest foreman's house, but a proper family home. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1891, and they buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch. Harrison mourned her deeply, grateful for all she had done for them. Sam Wright had died 2 years earlier in town, and they had brought his body back to be buried beside his sister. Both had become family, and their loss was keenly felt. But life continued its forward march. Henry turned 18 in 1898 and took on more responsibility at the ranch, working beside his father as a true partner. He had no interest in leaving Wyoming, content with the life he had always known. Rose, at 16, was courted by a young lawyer's son from Cheyenne, but she rejected his suit, declaring she was in no hurry to marry. She wanted to see more of the world first, and Natalie supported her daughter's independence. James, at 13, announced his intention to become a teacher. Harrison and Natalie encouraged this dream, knowing each child must find their own path. The twins, at 9, were inseparable and endlessly mischievous, keeping everyone on their toes. On a summer evening in 1900, Harrison and Natalie sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set. They were in their mid-40s now, graying at the temples but still strong and vital. The years had lined their faces but also deepened their love. "Do you remember that first ride from Medicine Bow to Cheyenne?" Natalie asked, a question she had posed many times over the years. "I remember every moment," Harrison said, taking her hand. I remember how afraid you were, how brave you were despite that fear. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I remember thinking you were kind, Natalie said. That was the first thing I noticed, your kindness, and your eyes, how they looked at me with respect. 22 years, Harrison mused. 22 years since that day. Look at everything we have built. Natalie surveyed their domain. The thriving ranch, the solid house, their 5 healthy children. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that frightened young woman on a stagecoach to this moment of profound contentment. I was so lost back then, she said. I thought I had nothing, no prospects, no future. But I had you even if I did not know it yet. You were waiting at the end of that trail, and you changed everything. We changed everything together, Harrison corrected. You gave me something to build for, a reason beyond just surviving. You gave me a family, a real home. I was just going through the motions before you came along. Their children's voices drifted from inside the house, arguing good-naturedly over something. Natalie smiled, listening to the familiar cacophony. They are growing up so fast, she said. Soon they will have their own lives, their own families. And we will be here, Harrison said. Together, watching our grandchildren run through this house just like our children did, growing old together, exactly as we promised. As the stars began to emerge and the evening air cooled, Harrison pulled Natalie close. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady comfort of his presence, as essential to her now as breathing. I love you, she said quietly. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end. And beyond, Harrison added, kissing the top of her head. Whatever comes after this life, I will find you there too. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true. The prairie stretched around them, dark and vast, but they were not lost in it. They had found their place, their home, in each other's arms. Years continued to pass in their steady rhythm. The ranch prospered through good times and weathered difficulties during lean years. Henry eventually married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they built a house on the far edge of the double-bar property. They gave Harrison and Natalie their first grandchild, a girl named Natalie June, in 1902. Rose did eventually marry, but not until she was 24, after traveling to Denver and San Francisco, satisfying her wanderlust. She married a banker with literary interests, and they settled in Cheyenne, visiting the ranch frequently. James became a teacher as he had dreamed, running the school in Medicine Bow. He married one of his fellow teachers, and they had a house full of bookish children who loved spending summers at the ranch with their grandparents. The twins remained close all their lives. Alice married young at 19 to a rancher's son. Lucy waited until 25 to marry a doctor who had come west to practice. Both stayed in Wyoming, both had children, and the family gatherings grew larger and louder with each passing year. Through it all, Harrison and Natalie remained the steady center. They aged together gracefully, their hair turning white, their movements slower but their love undiminished. They still took rides together when weather permitted, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. In 1920, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a massive party that brought together all their children, grandchildren, and friends from across Wyoming. The house and yard overflowed with people, laughter echoing off the mountains. Henry, now 40, gave a toast to his parents. My father once told me that he was just a cowboy with nothing much to offer my mother. But what he gave her, what they built together, is worth more than all the gold in California. They showed us what real love looks like. Constant, faithful, built on respect and partnership. They taught us that home is not just a place but the people you choose to share your life with. Natalie, sitting beside Harrison with his hand clasped in hers, felt tears stream down her face. These were tears of joy, of gratitude for the impossibly rich life she had been given. "I was so afraid that day in Medicine Bow," she said when the crowd called for her to speak. "I was alone and lost, and the future seemed dark. Then Harrison appeared and offered to ride with me. He has been riding beside me ever since, through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and challenge. He is my home, my heart, my everything." She turned to him, and though they were old now, when their eyes met, they were young again, two people falling in love on a trail under endless Wyoming sky. "I would do it all again," Harrison said, his voice still strong despite his years. "Every moment, every mile. You are the greatest adventure of my life." Natalie Harper Nash. They kissed while their family cheered, and the love between them was as vivid and true as it had been on their wedding day 4 decades earlier. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1925, at the age of 70. Natalie woke to find him beside her, his face peaceful, his hands still holding hers. She sat with him for a long time, memorizing every line of his beloved face, feeling the weight of his absence even as she felt grateful for all the years they had shared. They buried him on the hill beside Sam Wright and Eleanor, overlooking the ranch he had loved. The whole community turned out for the funeral, testament to the lives he had touched. Natalie lived 4 more years after Harrison's death. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Harrison, waiting for her on the other side. On a spring morning in 1929, Natalie asked Henry to take her riding. At 71, she was frail but still determined. He helped her onto a gentle horse and they rode slowly up to the overlook, to the spot where Harrison had once asked her to marry him. "This is where it all began," Natalie said, gazing out over the valley. "This is where he told me what our life would be like, and I told him I was not afraid." "Were you ever afraid, Mama?" Henry asked gently. "Only once," Natalie said. "That day in Medicine Bow when I was alone. After that, with Harrison beside me, I was never afraid again. He gave me courage I did not know I had." That night, Natalie went to sleep in the bed she had shared with Harrison for so many years and did not wake again. The doctor said it was her heart, worn out from a long and full life. But her children knew the truth. She had simply decided it was time to find Harrison again. They buried her beside him on the hill. Her headstone read, "Natalie Harper Nash, 1856–1929, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She rode fearlessly into the unknown and found love waiting. The Double Bar Ranch passed to Henry, who ran it with the same integrity his father had shown. The house remained standing, expanded and modernized but still recognizably the home Harrison and Natalie had built together. Their descendants continued to live on the land, carrying forward the legacy of two people who had found each other on a trail in Wyoming and built something that endured. Years later, one of Natalie's great-granddaughters found the letters Harrison had written during their courtship, carefully preserved in a trunk in the attic. She read them aloud to the assembled family, and everyone marveled at the beauty of the words, the depth of feeling they contained. Did they really love each other that much? A young great-great-grandchild asked. They did, her grandmother confirmed. They loved each other with everything they had, every day of their lives. That is why we are all here, because they chose each other and never stopped choosing each other. The letters were preserved in the family archives, tangible proof of a love that had shaped generations. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew down from the mountains, those who listened carefully swore they could hear laughter on the breeze, the sound of two souls still riding together through eternity, no longer alone, forever heading in the same direction. The story of Harrison and Natalie became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, embellished slightly with each telling but always true in its essence. A woman afraid and alone had met a man who offered kindness without expectation of reward. That simple act of decency had blossomed into a love that transformed both their lives, creating ripples that extended far beyond their own time on Earth. In Medicine Bow, where it all began, a historical marker was eventually placed near where the old stage station had stood. It commemorated the town's role in the development of the West, but locals knew another story, one of personal courage and love found in unlikely circumstances. They told visitors about the young woman from Philadelphia and the cowboy who had ridden beside her, showing that sometimes the greatest adventures come from simply offering to travel together. The Wild West had been a hard place, unforgiving and brutal in many ways, but it had also been a place where people could reinvent themselves, where connections forged in adversity became unbreakable bonds. Harrison and Natalie's story was one of thousands played out across the frontier, each unique but sharing common threads of hope, courage, and the human need for connection. As the 20th century progressed and the old ways faded, the ranch remained a touchstone, a reminder of what had been built by two people who refused to let fear dictate their choices. The land itself held their memory, the mountains and prairie unchanged while everything else transformed around them. And on certain nights, when the stars blazed overhead as brilliantly as they had in 1878, it was easy to imagine two figures on horseback, riding together across the endless grassland, heading toward a future they would build one day, one choice, one moment of courage at a time. Neither of them alone, both of them exactly where they belonged, side by side, moving in the same direction together.